It's a great pleasure to be here today at what's hoped to be the first inaugural lecture and a series of very inspiring lectures to commemorate, celebrate and perpetuate the work of Rosemary Crompton. Rosemary Crompton was one of the leading British sociologists of her generation. She was a major contribution to international scholarship and to shifting the parameters of the debates within which analysis of social class and work and gender are undertaken. She remains one of the most celebrated and the most widely cited British sociologists on that topic. When she died too young in 2011, there was widespread agreement amongst people who'd worked with her, colleagues who'd been inspired with her, that there ought to be some way to recognise formally her contribution in an enduring way. To do that, it was decided that the best thing would be to have a Rosemary Crompton Memorial Lecture, an annual lecture where a leading sociologist would be invited to give a research-led lecture on the topic of work, employment, social class or gender, or some combination of those. Very appropriately, the series has three main sponsors. The first of these is the Sociology department at City University, where she worked for the last 9 years of her life. The second is the British Sociological Association, of which she was a member for all of her life and to which she made very significant contributions. The third one is the journal Work, Employment, Society, of which she was a member of the founding editorial board, and she was editor from 1993 to 1996. For the remainder of her career, she was a major contributor and reviewer in the journal. It's worth spending a little more time to consider her experience as an academic in order to make sense of her intellectual journey. Rosemary was at the forefront of innovative UK sociological research throughout her career. In 1964, her London University undergraduate sociology course had equipped her with the credentials, along with what the late David Lockwood called her sparky personality and her obvious intelligence, to join the Affluent Worker Project team at the University of Cambridge. She was an interviewer and a routine research assistant, and she recalled her discovery working on that project of how much she enjoyed the excitement of the debates around it, even the very basic work associated with managing data. She decided that this was what she wanted to do, and she went on doing it for the rest of her life as a researcher and as a theorist, looking at the relationship between social class and work. As the youngest member of the research team and a woman, her enthusiasm to engage fully in debates and willingness to ask challenging questions wasn't always appreciated. Another of her early colleagues described her as very principled to the point of being unreasonable. Rosemary was very brave in all aspects of her life, and she was incorruptible. She didn't join cliques, she wasn't into political correctness, and she firmly refused to be oppressed. Her ability was recognised nonetheless, and in 1966, she was appointed as a junior research fellow to work with Professor Dorothy Wedderburn on a study of workers' attitudes to technology, which resulted in a path-breaking book, Workers' Attitudes to Technology, which is surprisingly often cited even now. In 1967, following the norms of the time, she moved to Norwich when her husband Gerald was appointed to an assistant lectureship in the recently founded University of East Anglia. There, she initially progressed very quickly from a temporary research assistant to an assistant lectureship in the Department of Sociology in 1968. And after the birth of her children, somewhat against the norms of the period, she continued to work in full-time employment at UEA. She remained there until 1989, and given her productivity, it's very hard to understand why the university didn't recognise this and failed to promote her to senior lectureship until 1986, despite her ability, her conscientiousness, and her impact and outputs, as we would say nowadays. These included two very well-received books, Economy and Class Structure with John Gubby in 1978 and White Collar Proletariat with Gareth Jones in 1984. She moved to the University of Kent at Canterbury in 1989 appointed as a senior lectureship with the promise of early promotion to readership, which, again, took rather longer than might have been expected to materialise. Again, it's difficult to avoid the conclusion that this tardiness reflected an unwillingness to give due recognition to a woman who consistently refused to play the gendered deference game. She finally moved to a chair at the University of Leicester in 1995 and moved on in 1999 to the easier to commute to from Kent chair at City University, where she remained until 2008. Rosemary's theoretical, methodological and substantive research interests remained remarkably consistent throughout her academic career. Having started from a core focus on the impact of social class on life chances and the centrality of work and employment in the reproduction or challenging of inequalities, her understanding of the complexities was further refined and clarified by fieldwork experience. There, the significance of gendered inequalities, which she was also experiencing at first hand as a woman in academia, was inescapable. There can be no doubt that embarking on her career as a young married woman in the mid-1960s, when gendered norms of academic and wider culture were considerably more restrictive than they are now, contributed to her growing awareness of the need to integrate gender into the analysis. Her subsequent work on social stratification was informed by a concern to explore the interaction of class and gender inequalities, and she carried on with that until the end of her working life. Rosemary was unequivocally a feminist, and in terms of her analytic approach, essentially Marxist, concerned to expose and document how power relations mediate access to social justice. But she didn't attach labels to herself. When others became immersed in theoretical debates about definitions of social class and how to do feminist research, often what she named pseudo-debates, where different people use different definitions and talk past each other, she carried on doing research, focusing on particular contexts, organisations, occupations, and from the early 1990s, increasingly comparative research, in an attempt to better understand how and why social institutions persisted and changed. She increasingly regarded cross-cultural comparisons as essential to understanding who goes where and who gets what. In 2005, she was invited by the BSA to contribute a written summary of her journey into sociology, and she concluded by saying, "I've always felt that sociology is like detective work, a combination of different kinds of reasons, different kinds of methods in order to arrive at a satisfactory explanation of a particular phenomenon for the time being." Rosemary was extraordinarily productive throughout her distinguished academic career, writing, co-writing and editing many books, journal articles and chapters in edited volumes. She also led and contributed to a large number of externally funded research projects, and throughout she carried a full teaching load and fulfilled more than her share of administrative responsibilities in all the universities in which she worked. Her professional contribution to sociology and to scholarship went beyond her workplaces. Throughout her career, she served in a wide range of advisory editorial boards and committees. In recognition of her work, she was elected as a Fellow of the British Academy in 2010, and in 2011 she was one of only 10 people awarded the accolade of a BSA Lifetime Achievement Award. Rosemary, consequently, was a first-rate academic and sociologist. In Goldner's terms, an excellent producer, wholesaler and retailer of knowledge. Among her last publications, perhaps the clearest defence of mixed methods research, arguments for the persistent significance of social class, and defence of the value of employment-based class analysis can be found in her last two single-authored articles. The first one, 40 Years of Sociology, Some Comments, was published in Sociology in 2008, and the second, Class and Employment, published in Work Employment Society in 2010. Both articles demonstrate her intellectual strength, her knowledge of relevant evidence and debates, her analytic sophistication, capacity to see the strengths and weaknesses of competing intellectual paradigms, along with her superb command of the English language and her wicked sense of humour. Her written work was exemplary, and it's possible to see from that what an excellent teacher she must have been, with her capacity to explain complex phenomena and concepts clearly and succinctly without recourse to jargon. She was very good at using metaphors and illustrative examples effectively. The third edition of her 1993 textbook, Class and Stratification, which had been extensively revised incorporating discussions of contemporary economic and social change, was published in 2008 and still in print and still selling rather well. It was universally positively reviewed, including in the Times Higher Education, where it was described as by far the best existing guide to the present state of class analysis, remarkably well informed about the details of important current controversies. It is no surprise then that her last single-authored article, Class and Employment, in WES Volume 24, 2010, has been one of the most oft-cited WES articles in recent years. Rosemary made a huge contribution to sociological scholarship. By the end of her life, she felt able to draw a line under her academic writing, and she said to me, not long before she died, that she had said all that she wanted to say. I think that's a pretty good way to sign off an academic career.